Three boys rode their bikes home on a dark Minnesota road. Only two of them came back. For 27 years, police hunted a missing monster, but the man who took Jacob Wetterling was never missing. They questioned him. They searched his house. They found disturbing photos. And then they let him walk free. Tonight, we're exposing how a killer hid in plain sight for nearly 3 decades, and how one boy's disappearance changed American law forever. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications. Here on Crime, Motive, and Mystery, these stories deserve to be told. Now let's go back to that dark Minnesota road. Jacob Wetterling was abducted on October 22, 1989. Hundreds of suspects were investigated. More than 1,000 volunteers joined the search. Over 70,000 tips were logged. And yet, for 27 agonizing years, the case remained unsolved. The breakthrough, when it finally came, emerged from an attack that had happened just 9 months earlier. A strikingly similar crime. Another boy, a boy who survived. How could such a clear connection remain hidden for nearly 3 decades? How could investigators miss what was right in front of them? What makes this case so absolutely maddening is that the monster responsible was never truly missing. His name had been on the police's radar from day one. His shoes matched the prints at the scene. His tires matched the tracks in the dirt. Yet he was brushed aside, dismissed, allowed to live in freedom for decades while the investigation chased ghosts and destroyed the lives of innocent men. But while the official search stalled, Jacob's mother, Patty Wetterling, turned her unbearable grief into a relentless crusade. For 27 years, she refused to let her son's name fade into nothing more than a statistic. Her determination forced the United States to enact a landmark federal law establishing the first national registry for those who prey on children. This is a story of a mother's iron will, a system's catastrophic failure, and a truth that waited 10,000 days to be told. St. Joseph, Minnesota in the late 1980s was a small rural community of roughly 2,500 people defined by a deep and unshakable sense of safety. The kind of place where neighbors didn't lock their doors, where children played outside until the streetlights came on. The town's police chief didn't even feel the need to carry a firearm. This was America's heartland. This was where families felt safe. Jacob Wetterling was born on February 17, 1978. He was the son of Patty and Jerry Wetterling, growing up alongside his siblings Amy, Trevor, and Carmen, an 11-year-old 6th grader known for his gentle disposition. He loved hockey, basketball, and watching football on the couch with his dad. His favorite food was steak. His favorite color was blue. He was by all accounts a normal kid, a good kid, the kind of boy who should have grown up, graduated high school, gotten married, had children of his own, but fate had other plans. October 22nd, 1989, began like any perfect autumn Sunday. Jacob and his father went fishing in the morning. They came home to watch the Vikings game. The whole family went ice skating that afternoon. It was a day filled with everything Jacob loved, providing absolutely no hint of the tragedy that loomed just hours away. That evening, Patty and Jerry left for a dinner engagement 25 miles away. They left the older children at home. Jacob, his brother Trevor, and his friend Aaron Larson decided to ride their bikes to the local Tom Thumb store to rent a movie. They called Patty for permission. She said no. It was dark. It was late. Something in her told her no. But Trevor asked to speak with his father. Jerry overruled Patty's decision. He told the boys they could go, but insisted they take a flashlight and wear a reflective vest. This decision, born of a father's desire to give his children a small measure of independence, would become one of the most agonizing memories the family would ever carry. Jerry Wetterling would carry that weight for 27 years. The three boys set out on their bicycles, pedaling into the darkness. They rented the naked gun from the Tom Thumb and began the ride home. They were roughly 2 to 3 minutes away from safety when a man emerged from the shadows and walked directly toward them, dressed entirely in black, a black mask over his face. He announced he had a gun and commanded the boys to stop. He ordered them into the ditch, face down on the cold ground. At first, the boys wondered if this was a prank. That illusion shattered the moment he spoke in a chilling, raspy voice none of them recognized. He asked Trevor's age. 10. He told him to run into the bushes and not look back, or he would be shot. Then he turned to Jacob and Aaron, groping Jacob in a way that made the horror of the situation absolutely clear. This wasn't a robbery. This was something far worse. He asked Aaron his age. 11. He sent him running too. Aaron caught up with Trevor in the darkness. When they finally turned to look back, both Jacob and the masked man had vanished, completely disappeared. No sound of a vehicle, no footsteps, nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed them both. It was approximately 9:20 in the evening. That was the moment Jacob Wetterling was seen for the final time. Trevor and Aaron reached the Wetterling house screaming. Their neighbor Merle Jerzak called Patty and Jerry immediately. Those words. A stranger had taken Jacob. Can you imagine hearing those words as a parent? When the first police officers arrived, they made a critical error. Rather than immediately launching a pursuit, they spent the most crucial minutes questioning Trevor and Aaron with skepticism. They didn't believe the account of an abduction. They entertained alternative theories. Maybe Jacob had run away. Maybe this was a childhood game gone wrong. It was not until 10:45 at night, nearly 90 minutes after the abduction, that a formal search was initiated. 90 minutes. By that time, Jacob could have been 40 miles away. Searchers found only 2 physical clues near the gravel driveway, a set of footprints in the dirt and tire tracks leading away from the scene. Officers also failed to canvass the immediate neighbors. They never knocked on the door of Dan Rissaby, a music teacher who lived at the very end of that gravel driveway, the very driveway where those tire tracks led. Earlier that evening, Dan had seen headlights moving slowly down his private driveway before turning around and leaving. He dismissed it as someone who had gotten lost. He never knew what that car might have meant. It was a missed opportunity that would have consequences for decades. In the days that followed, thousands of volunteers searched fields and ditches shoulder to shoulder. Bloodhounds, helicopters, ATVs, and horses scoured the terrain. No trace of Jacob was found. Patty and Jerry committed themselves to keeping Jacob's name in the public eye, appearing in media interviews almost every day. In one interview, Jerry spoke with raw remorse painful to witness. "I'll carry this for the rest of my life," he said. "I'm the one who made the choice that night, and my son never came home." Over the years, the investigation would amass 70,000 leads, each one investigated, each one a dead end. Every year on Jacob's birthday, February 17th, Patty and Jerry lit a candle on a cupcake in his honor, holding on to the hope that he would return to blow it out. They kept the porch light burning every single night for 27 years, a silent signal to Jacob that the way home was always open. 5 years passed. Then, during the annual prayer service on October 22nd, 1994, a woman named Evangeline attended the gathering. She was a former high school friend of Patty's, now living in Little Falls, Minnesota. During the service, she looked toward the altar and recognized the priest leading the prayers, Father Dan Keller. She knew him from Little Falls. After the service, Evangeline pulled Patty aside and asked what she knew about Father Dan's background. Patty knew very little. He was just their priest. Evangeline then shared a story that left Patty visibly shaken. Before his transfer to St. Joseph, Father Dan had been a newly ordained priest at St. Francis Church in Little Falls. According to persistent local rumors, he had been involved in the alleged sexual abuse of a 13-year-old male parishioner. The boy's family reportedly went to both the police and the church, but the matter faded away without public explanation. Father Dan was quietly demoted and transferred. Rumors circulated that he was a nephew of a high-ranking church official and that the case had been settled behind closed doors. Money changed hands. Silence was bought. What made Patty's blood run cold was the timing. Father Dan Keller had been assigned to St. Joseph Catholic Church just 6 months before Jacob went missing. He arrived in the spring. Jacob disappeared in the fall. Jerry immediately took the information to local police. Chief Schmedinsky dismissed it as hearsay. There was no evidence, just rumors. And you don't investigate a priest based on rumors. The matter stayed buried until 1996, when Jerry and Patty learned Father Dan was being transferred again. Jerry gathered more than 1,000 signatures from local residents and submitted a petition to the Stearns County Sheriff's Office. formally requesting that investigators review any possible connection the priest had to the disappearance. Finally, the sheriff's office agreed to open an investigation. Detective Paul McCormick was assigned to lead it. He requested records from Morrison County related to the alleged assault in Little Falls. The response was troubling. No record existed. No report, no paperwork. It was as if the incident had never happened. Father Dan was brought in for questioning. He stated he had been at the church all evening on October 22, 1989. But no one could corroborate his alibi. He had been alone. He then agreed to a polygraph test. He failed. The machine said he was lying. Father Dan explained away by saying the events were too far in the past and that his unclear memory caused him distress. Without physical evidence, the sheriff's office had no grounds to hold him. He walked out a free man. Detective McCormick later played an audio recording of Father Dan's statement to Trevor, now 16 years old. Trevor said the voice sounded very similar to the raspy voice from that night, but he couldn't be certain. Similar wasn't enough. They needed proof, and they didn't have it. The investigation into Father Dan provoked intense backlash from the local Catholic community. Supporters called for the social isolation of the Wetterling family. A counter-petition was submitted to the bishop demanding excommunication of Jerry and Patty for what signers call sacrilege against a servant of the church. Despite the hostility, despite being ostracized by people they had known their entire lives, Jerry and Patty refused to stop. They had already lost Jacob. They couldn't lose the search for him, too. With the church firmly behind Father Dan and no physical evidence to act on, the investigation stalled. The files were put away. The questions went unanswered. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now and say I'm still here. And if you haven't subscribed to Crime, Motive, and Mystery yet, do it now. This case is about to take another devastating turn. In 2004, newly elected Stearns County Sheriff John Sanner made a public vow to solve the Wetterling case. His team developed a new theory. The abductor had not used a vehicle to escape. He had been on foot. This pointed to someone who lived in very close proximity to the gravel driveway. That suspicion fell on Dan Risby, the music teacher at the end of the driveway. The shift was driven by a belated account from a man named Kevin. On the night of the abduction, Kevin and his girlfriend had been listening to a police scanner and drove to the area out of curiosity. They turned down Risby's driveway, saw the boys' bicycles in the ditch, and drove away. Kevin had shared this story casually at parties for years, until 2003, when he told it to a federal marshal who immediately told him to give a formal statement. To Sheriff Sanner's team, Kevin's car explained both the vehicle Dan Risby had seen in his driveway and the tire tracks at the scene. The abductor had been on foot the whole time. On June 30th, 2010, a massive task force executed an intensive 2-day search of Risby's property. News helicopters broadcast images of investigators in hazmat suits excavating his yard. His face was plastered across every television screen in Minnesota. The search destroyed Dan Risby's life. An innocent man, an elementary school music teacher who had cooperated fully with every investigation. He lived under a cloud of suspicion for years. They were convinced he had done it. They just couldn't prove it, because he hadn't. The answer had been hiding in a file from 9 months before Jacob disappeared. A boy named Jared Skiro. On January 13th, 1989, 12-year-old Jared was walking home alone in Cold Spring, Minnesota, when a man in a blue car pulled up and asked for directions. Then he stepped out of the vehicle, told Jared he had a gun, and forced the boy into the back seat. He told Jared to put a hat over his head. Don't look. Don't see where we're going. As they drove, Jared heard the sound of a police scanner coming from the front of the car. The same kind of scanner that would later be found in Danny Heinrich's possession. The man drove to a remote gravel road and sexually assaulted Jared. Afterward, he dropped the boy off 2 minutes from his home with the same chilling warning that Trevor and Aaron would hear 9 months later. Run and don't look back. Tell anyone, and I'll find you and kill you. Jared reported the attack. The case went cold. No one connected it to Jacob's disappearance. Decades later, Jared, now an adult, moved to Painesville and began hearing about a series of sexual assaults on boys in the area. Something clicked. He connected the dots himself, reached out to other victims. and together they contacted investigators working the Wetterling case. This renewed focus led investigators to re-examine physical evidence preserved for decades. Critically, they still had the clothing Jared had been wearing on the night of his attack. Using DNA technology that hadn't existed in 1989, they tested that clothing against evidence collected from a suspect in the original investigation. The results were a definitive match. The man who had been hiding in plain sight for 27 years. The man who had been questioned and released in the very first days of the investigation. The man whose name had been in the files from the beginning. Danny Heinrich. Heinrich was a 53-year-old single man living quietly in Annandale, Minnesota. He had been the very first suspect questioned after Jacob's disappearance because of the striking similarities between his attack on Jared and the Wetterling abduction. His shoes were a close match to the footprints at the scene. His tires matched the tracks in the dirt. Police searched his father's house and found black boots, cargo pants, police scanners, and locked trunks. Inside those trunks were photographs. One showed a boy in his underwear. Another showed a boy emerging from a shower, wearing only a towel. Heinrich insisted the photos were innocent. In a decision that defied all logic, investigators allowed him to keep them. He later burned them. They let him walk, and he remained free for another 26 years. On July 28, 2015, armed with a new search warrant based on the DNA match, investigators searched Heinrich's home in Annandale. Inside a kitchen drawer, they found duct tape and handcuffs. For large bins were filled with boys' clothing in children's sizes. Dozens of VHS tapes contained footage he had secretly recorded of young boys at playgrounds and swimming pools. And 19 binders were filled with child pornography. Heinrich was arrested and charged with 25 counts related to child pornography. Finally, after 26 years, Danny Heinrich was behind bars. 3 weeks before his trial, Heinrich's legal team proposed a plea deal. If he provided a full confession to the abduction and murder of Jacob Wetterling and led authorities to his remains, he would not face a murder charge. Instead, he would plead guilty to a single count of child pornography possession, carrying a maximum of 20 years. 20 years for murdering a child. For Patty and Jerry, this was an impossible choice. But after 27 years of not knowing, after 27 years of that porch light burning, the need to bring Jacob home and know the truth outweighed everything else. They agreed. Heinrich's confession was cold, methodical, delivered without a trace of remorse. He had been driving aimlessly around St. Joseph on the night of October 22nd, 1989. Driving, looking, hunting. He spotted 3 boys on bicycles heading into town and parked near the gravel driveway to wait for their return. He knew they would come back. He confronted them at gunpoint, forced them into the ditch, sent Trevor and Aaron running into the darkness, and handcuffed Jacob before placing him in the front seat of his car. As Heinrich drove away, Jacob was crying, asking what he had done wrong. "What did I do? Why are you doing this? I didn't do anything wrong." Heinrich monitored his police scanner as reports of a missing boy flooded the airwaves. He commanded Jacob to stay low. "Stay down. Don't let anyone see you." He drove to a remote gravel pit near Paynesville. He ordered Jacob out of the car, removed the handcuffs, and assaulted the boy in the cold October darkness. Afterward, Jacob was shivering, crying, saying he was cold and wanted to go home. "I'm cold. I want to go home. Please let me go home." As Jacob was dressing, a patrol car drove past the area. Heinrich panicked. He told Jacob to turn around. "Don't look at me." And he pulled the trigger. The gun jammed. Click. Nothing. Jacob stood there knowing what was coming. Heinrich cleared the chamber and fired again. This time the gun worked. Jacob fell to the ground. Heinrich went home. He returned hours later with a shovel, found the ground too hard to dig by hand, walked to a nearby construction site, took a bobcat, and used it to dig a grave deep enough to hide a child's body. He buried Jacob there, covered the grave with grass and brush, and returned the bobcat as if nothing had happened. About a year later, fearing discovery, he returned, moved the remains to a nearby cow pasture, and buried them in a hole about 2 feet deep. Jacob's final resting place. A shallow grave in a cow pasture, alone in the darkness. When Heinrich led investigators to the location in September 2016, they had brought metal detectors, expecting to search for the metal buttons on Jacob's red jacket. They never needed them. As they approached the location Heinrich had described, they found a small, weathered piece of red fabric sticking out of the ground. Just a little piece of red cloth, barely visible above the soil. It had remained there through 27 Minnesota winters and 27 Minnesota summers, while the world moved on, while Patty lit birthday candles and Jerry kept the porch light burning. Jacob had been there the whole time, waiting to be found. The recovery of those remains dismantled the fragile hope Patty and Jerry had tended for 10,000 days. The birthday cupcake ritual was over. The porch light was extinguished, and the family was left to reconcile the sweet boy they remembered with the knowledge that his last words were a question of his own innocence. A child who died not understanding why, due to expired statutes of limitations. Heinrich was never charged with Jacob's murder. His sentence was tied to the child pornography found in his home. 20 years. 20 years for decades of predatory behavior, for destroying families, for murdering a child. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But Patty Wetterling had refused to wait for the legal system to define Jacob's legacy. During the years he was still missing, she had lobbied in Washington, meeting senators and congressmen, telling her son's story over and over again. Her efforts produced the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act, signed into law by President Bill Clinton in 1994. Before this law, a predator could commit a crime in one state, serve time, move to another state, and vanish into a new community. Nobody knew. Nobody was warned. Jacob's law ended that. It created a mandatory registration system for sex offenders and paved the way for Megan's Law in 1996, which made those registries public, giving parents the right to know if a convicted predator lived on their street. At Jacob's funeral, Patty spoke through tears. "My little boy is finally home," she said, and then she did something remarkable. She expressed regret for those whose lives have been damaged by the investigation, for Dan Risavy, for Father Dan, for everyone touched by 27 years of suspicion. "I'm sorry for what they went through," she said. "I know this investigation hurt people, but we had to find our son. We had to know." The Wetterling case leaves 3 lessons that anyone concerned with the safety of children needs to carry. First, the system failed when it mattered most. Heinrich was in their hands in 1989. They found photographs of children in states of undress in his locked trunks and handed them back. If you are a parent or community advocate, push for mandatory protocols requiring law enforcement to act when any evidence of child exploitation is discovered, regardless of whether it directly connects to the case being investigated. Those photographs should have ended Danny Heinrich in 1989. Second, survivors connecting their cases broke this one open. Jared Skier was attacked 9 months before Jacob. He reported it. The file sat untouched. If you or someone you know survived a crime involving a stranger and the case went cold, contact your local cold case unit and ask whether the file has been compared to similar incidents in the region. That connection took 27 years to make. It should have taken 9 months. Third, Patty Wetterling spent 27 years turning the worst thing that ever happened to her family into a tool that protects children across this country today. Use it. Know your local sex offender registry. Know the route your children take, not out of fear, out of the vigilance she fought so hard to give every parent in America. If you watched this far, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Every share helps us here at Crime, Motive, and Mystery bring more forgotten cases back into the light. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. Watch over the children in your life. Justice delayed is not justice denied. We will always keep searching. We will always keep fighting. And we will never let these stories fade away. Until next time, this is Crime, Motive, and Mystery.